Anybody who's ever been involved in any kind of sale has heard the phrase, sell the value. And great advice. And some of us may have even been taught why to sell the value, and even fewer of us, unfortunately, how to sell the value. But almost nobody has been told when to sell the value. And that's a really important concept. It's one that I talk about in my book, Radical Value, and it's one that I want to talk with you about today. My name is Mark Boundy. I'm the author of Radical Value, president of Value Clarity and Boundy Consulting. So I've developed this concept, and we describe it graphically in a graph that I developed in cooperation with my very good friend, Rich Blakeman. And this graph looks like this. And what it describes is the time value of selling value. And it's kind of a takeoff on that finance concept, the time value of money, where $1 now is worth more than $1 in the future. And selling value early is much more effective than selling value late. And here's what I mean by that. So here's the customer journey in time from left to right. So this is right when the customer decides that status quo is no longer acceptable. And then they progress through what about it is unacceptable? What could I do instead? What are the options? What additional things should I be looking for? Who are the best at delivering those, and who I should buy from? So that customer buying journey, all the way from status quo, no longer acceptable, to making a purchase, is depicted on left to right. And during that, they don't really ask for a discount until they know what it is they're going to buy. And then the price pressure, discounting pressure, hockey sticks way up. So the frequency with which they ask for a discount, the frequency of pricing pressure happens very late in the customer's buying process. However, their understanding of outcomes and their willingness to learn about new outcomes, to describe those outcomes, to learn the value of the outcome happens very early, and then tapers off the more they think they understand, until it's almost nil at the end. So in the typical B2B buying process that I work with, this is what happens here, where this might be the RFP. So after this is when they start really grinding for price, right? Then this is when best and final happens, and when they play all the purchasing games and so forth. And anytime you try to sell value, it's very apparent that the customer perceives this as a manipulative, lame attempt to defend your price. So it's too late. You've been hit by the bus, and it's too late to get out of the way. The problem is the opportunity to sell value happened earlier. We've heard some more research that says that more than half of the customer's buying process happens before the salesperson was engaged. And we hear numbers like 56, 58%, all well and good, but that number changes. It goes earlier when the customer is not confident about their buying decision, about what they know about the buying decision. So if it's an unfamiliar buy, high risk buy, it might go earlier. If it's highly familiar, it might go all the way into RFP. But let's just kind of take that number, that 50-ish% number, and say, here is about when the salespeople have been engaged. So this is not just your salespeople and you, this is every sales organization who's being invited to pursue this, to bid on this. So this is when it gets really crowded, and you can see some people are going to sell value, some people are not, but this is when salespeople are engaged in the process. So far, so good. So selling during this is possible, it's productive. It gets a little bit more difficult, but here is what happens. And so the reason sales is engaged late is because customers don't particularly like using salespeople to inform themselves about their situation, about why status quo is unacceptable, and so forth. And so what they use over here is some combination of content and consultants. Content and consultants. And that content might be from your marketing people if you're really lucky, and if your marketing people make content that describes achievable outcomes, and if your content describes outcomes that they can get from your company, but not by buying from somebody else. That is, if you have a differentiated feature that drives a customer outcome, and your marketing folks were insightful enough to make content about that outcome, and the customer saw it and integrated that into their thinking, now you've got content that built the value in the customer's mind, and your salespeople can start reinforcing that and hammering that home when they're in the room. But the other thing is consultants, and this isn't just consultants that they hire from the outside. You know, it might happen very much if it was a very unfamiliar purchase, but if you and your salespeople are perceived as consultants, as valued resources, you are involved in this phase as well. So you can be a valued consultant, a valued partner, and have a seat at the table, a seat to help build that value earlier. So this graph shows us the value of selling value at different times, how you have to integrate your content strategy and becoming a consultant, understanding getting the business acumen so that you can understand the customer's business so that you can get a seat at that table, and being a regular old salesperson. But when you're selling, how important it is to reinforce any outcomes and to get those uncovered as early as possible before the customer cuts power on their exploration activity and understanding new outcomes that they might have access to. So I hope this was helpful to you in understanding not only not necessarily how to sell value, but when to sell value, and why it's so important to sell value early so that you don't have to get ground on price late. I'm Mark Boundy. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Give a call if you have any questions or want to talk about it further. Thanks, and have a great day.